Are less carbs more effective when it's super hot out? What's up, everybody? It's Brendan Hauser with EVOQ Bike. Will and I were talking on our coach's call, and we both have had some interesting rides where it's been super, super hot out, really humid. And after I posted a little clip on Instagram, very confused on how I went from 510 grams of carbs on a 5-hour ride to 220 grams of carbs on a 5-hour ride, much less than I normally would take. And two people sent me two different studies showing how they've they've studied that there are reduced carbohydrate oxidation rates when it's super hot out. So this post is us going to be just chatting about the topic in general and what Will did. He raced Holly Shelter, where it was a 2.5-hour gravel race where it was, I think he said 118. So on the crazy end of the spectrum. And I quickly touch on what happened on my ride and some things that I've sussed out. And then I'll make another very short video. I want to make like a 5 to 7 minute. Here are the two studies. Here are the main takeaways. That'll probably come in a couple weeks. We've just got a lot of awesome podcasts and other things to film. But you can just bookmark this or send it to yourself to remember for next April before it gets really hot wherever you live. Hopefully this helps you with your training. Good luck. Stay cool. Hydrate. Things change when it's this hot. Good luck with your training and racing. And someone said to me, hey, I realized you guys have a blog. Check out the blog. There are tons of topics that you can delve into and get more info, and we're constantly updating them. So good luck. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brendan Hauser with EVOQ Bike, and we've got special guest, Will Hardin, back. Will, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm stoked to talk about this topic.
We're talking about summer heat. Will's in some summer heat. You can maybe hear in the background a little Chicago grit. He is literally at the start-finish line or down the block. But we were talking just a couple days ago about the heat. It's slaughtering watts, how to train in it, how to race in it. Are we eating too many carbs in it? Just the whole big picture, because if people follow me on Instagram, you might have saw a quick little video I posted that was puzzling to me where I ate less carbs and felt much better. And within a couple hours, two different people sent me two different studies that I've never even seen. One is from 2002. One is from 2013, actually, just a couple months ago in May, that talk about the reduction of carbohydrate oxidation when it's hot. And I'll make a separate video just hitting the highlights of those two studies. But I want to talk to Will because he was like, wait a minute, what have you heard? Because this is my experience. So this will be more like the real life athlete in the trenches story. And then, yeah, if you guys have questions, hit up Will or me about it or in the comment section. But yeah, Will, if you can kick it off, when we started talking about this on the coach's call, what's brought this up? Was it you had mentioned some athletes that were struggling? You just had a race where it was like brutal. Just go in on either of those.
Yeah, a little bit of both. It was interesting that you were talking about that. And I don't know if I noticed it in my actual training, but once you picked up that like eating less on hot rides is a legitimate thing, I picked up that I had also been eating maybe 20 to 40 grams an hour on my hot endurance rides now. And hot for me is like 95 to 98 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's hot.
Down,
That's
yeah,
super
down in
hot.
Winston-Salem. It's steamy too. But I had done these other two events, and I was like, man, I didn't really need to eat a ton. What is there to this? And yeah, it was interesting to hear that you've had like people with studies. I always appreciate a good study. So yeah, my race, I have these two race files that we can actually look at. But the first one I did a gravel race in Holly Shelter, North Carolina, and it was 54 miles, about 2.5 hours. I drank like 4 liters of water, and I think total I might have had 45 grams an hour at like, we can look at the pace, but I was pretty close to 300 watts for that 2.5 hours. So it's not a lot.
Give people, where does that fall in terms of like zone? How was the zone breakdown? Like, was it super hard in the beginning and then you were riding? What is 300 for you, like tempo, or just so some people be like, they don't know what 300 means to you?
Right. Yeah. 300 is like right where it switches for me, right where my tempo starts. So I was like pretty much at tempo, which in the heat, the feels like apparently at the nature preserve was 118 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the real feel. So I had to pace it a lot differently for the whole race of just like taking a few watts off every once in a while. Yeah, normalized power of 298. So just took a little bit of watts off the whole time. I think probably the first hour where I did the most attacking because it was a little cooler. Yeah, it was a lot harder. Normalized 320 for the first hour. And then, yeah, just had to like pace myself. And I think that's important in hot races because you're going to lose that power like you were at altitude. So that's a wild part of racing in the heat.
Do you have it broken down in front of you of like what percent of the either 2.5 hours or the beginning was above threshold? And sorry, everybody, we're kind of doing this on the fly, so we don't have every little nugget already outlined. Or
Yeah,
any of you, or if you just have like a guesstimate.
I spent during the 2.5 hour race, I spent about 40 minutes over 300 watts, and then 6% of the race, or 10 minutes over 380. So that's my threshold, right about in that zone, and then
Yeah.
5 minutes in zone 5, so like VO2, which was actually a lot for a gravel race, and then another 5 minutes over 500 watts. So I did a few hard attacks in the beginning that would have caused that heavier zone up top, but yeah,
Okay.
interesting way to race it for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, from what I'm hearing, is just everybody had to tamper down the watts big time because even if it's a gravel race, though, there's still tons of VO2 max time. I mean, it's like, and if it's a 2.5 hour one, I would assume it's just really hard, unless this could be a whole other podcast of like what was the field like and how did the race unfold in the beginning. But okay, so that's and then what else? You had some athletes you said that were kind of struggling with the same thing. Do you remember from their messages? Like, what was their scenario?
Yeah, I think the biggest point of most athletes, especially the ones that I've had, is there's a certain point in the race where it just turns. Like either you have your stomach turn and you just like can't consume any carbohydrates, or like the heat causes cramps or various other issues. And cramps are a particularly interesting one because we know a lot of things play into how cramps start. But it is different per person what's actually causing you to have a cramp. So you have to stay on top of all of your pacing, all of the heat mitigation stuff you can, the nutrition. I think the biggest thing, especially in shorter races, is just like starting kind of cold if you can. If you can like get cold water, I put ice like in the pockets of my jersey if I don't have ice socks. Ice socks are obviously great. I spray a ton of water all over me. Both of these races, I probably spent a liter. Hour crit race and then the 2.5 hour gravel race, is probably put a full liter on my body. And then like that includes you just put the water bottle into your shoe and just like spray water into your shoe because that's a great place to lose heat. Hands, face, all great places to get water, preferably cold water on.
And where did Robin Carpenter stress? Did you see his post about that?
Yeah, I did see. The groin area is also a fantastic place to lose
Yeah.
heat, and it may be weird, but it is effective.
Yeah, private parts. So it's these for people who are wondering what are the studies. The first one from 2002 actually has Asker Jukendrup, who a lot of people know. It's just called heat stress increases muscle glycogen use but reduces the oxidation of ingested carbohydrates during exercise. So simply said, the glycogen that we have stored is going to get used faster, and the amount of food that you eat is actually not used as well for fuel. And the big line in here that you can see, even in just the abstract, these results demonstrate the oxidation rate of ingested carbohydrates is reduced and muscle glycogen utilization is increased during exercise in the heat compared with a cool environment. And then the second one, and I haven't even had time to look if there's, I'm sure there's probably more, is from May of 2023 from the European Journal of Applied Physiology. It is by Charonsap, Charoensap, if you want to look it up. Carbohydrate, but not fat, oxidation is reduced during moderate intensity exercise performed in 33 versus 18 degrees centigrade at matched heart rates. And the big line here is basically the same thing. Heat stress induced reduction in carb oxidation was associated with the observed reduction in power output. So they also looked at like how did the rider perform. And the interesting thing in this one, if you scroll towards the end, I don't have the exact values, but they have a chart that the x-axis is time where they measure up to an hour and a half, and the carb oxidation rate is up to 3 grams per minute. They never hit 3 grams a minute. Um, Not obviously, but obviously because that would be 180 an hour, which is just no one's seen that. But it starts at 2. So that would be 120 grams an hour, which is one of the numbers that we've all heard. And it looks, there's no like dash lines. It goes from 2 to 1. It's definitely below 1.5. I want to guess it's like 1.3 is my guess, but I haven't seen like a chart of them all. But that would be almost 70 grams an hour. So I think for any athlete, like what's the takeaway here? Okay. We're like throwing a bunch of like stuff out there. I think if you're riding and training in a really hot environment, have you ever had the feeling when, if your long ride is 3 hours or 5 hours or whatever, you cramp? I've used to like shovel down more carbs, being like, I feel bad. I thought it was a fueling thing. That never really made me feel better. That was kind of also when I have that, I don't want to say just head exploding because that kind of can be people might think of like intervals, but you know that hot feeling where like your ears are almost popping and it's like, oh, I should probably not be exercising. I think that's when we need to be eating less. And I haven't fiddled with this yet, but to me, for someone to say, hey, you should probably be eating 60 or 70 grams, at first I'm thinking, no way. But I mean, these studies and my own anecdotal experience, which I'll probably talk about in the other video, but yeah, I went from doing 110 grams an hour, so I did 550 on a 5 hour ride, to 220 over a 5 hour ride. Felt way less wrecked afterwards, which is very weird. And I won't even add the curveball. I did take 2 of these Vespas that we did a podcast on. I haven't sussed that out yet, but because it was my last 2, I just placed another big order because now I thought, okay, now I really need to mess with this stuff and figure it out. And I messaged the guy who had told me, try this in heat, try this in heat. And I said, okay, man, I finally tried it in heat. What the hell? And I'll go in on it later, but they're all about how obviously when it's really hot out, a lot of blood is going to our skin to help us thermoregulate. And if we're shoveling in more carbs, that's even more blood taken away from our legs, pushing pedals to our digestive tract. So he says, obviously, he goes, I want to use the term like put your digestive tract to sleep. Obviously, that's not the real thing happening. But if you can utilize more fat, you will be better off in the heat. And it was the exact same ride, same temps, same humidity. So I just find it very interesting. Um, what other thoughts do you have on this topic?
Yeah, I think you
And
can
maybe
come at it.
what's your other suggestion? How are you going to adjust your training or racing with this? Like, what are you going to experiment with?
Yeah, you've got to come at it from a few different ways. Obviously, being able to utilize fat is like one of the best indicators of like having that high base endurance. Like you can modify it in a few ways, but your body's ability to use fat while you're riding at a given intensity is going to change based off of how fit you are. So getting more fit is always going to help with riding in the heat. That's not a big surprise. But you are going to use a lot of those glycogen stores compared to when you're in a cooler race where you can consume more food and then you're using the glucose you're intaking, or the
Mm-hmm.
sugars you're intaking. You're not going to be able to use those sugars as much. So your glycogen stores are going to go away quite a bit faster. And that's got to play into how you pace the race. I mean, you're just going to not have that energy available, and that's going to be a problem. You can extend it a little bit by cooling yourself down, which will possibly help you to keep that usage up and spare those glycogen stores. But yeah, cool yourself down, get in great shape is awesome. But yet meter yourself is going to be a key in sparing those glycogen stores, because at some point you're going to hit a wall. But it's important to keep in mind that your stomach's just not going to be able to absorb quite as much. There's not as much blood in there. So don't force feed yourself as much in the heat, I think is a takeaway that I'm going to use for my hotter rides.
I think this could be a case for ketones also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I used those at Dirty Kitten Gravel last year when it was 95, I don't know, somewhere in Virginia, super hot, and I was crushing them that day. I think I had 3 bottles over a 5-hour race. And unfortunately, I flatted and was chasing for the last 2 hours, but those seemed like just, I always call it like the mindy racer. You like take it, you're like, oh, I feel fresh again. And I never had that like swamped, overly, I shouldn't be riding a bike feeling right now. One thing I did want to bring up was another anecdotal sort of story that I have from somebody that I think is important just to share with people, because I know experienced riders, and we probably should have posted this before the end of July, but maybe we can like repost it next year, that struggle seeing the watts decrease or just not, um, they don't feel like they're growing. And this athlete had a somewhat, I don't want to say it, the situation was compounded by, he had a bad thing happen at a race where he kind of lost a result. He then had a weird crash and then just was getting brutally beat down by the heat. And he messaged me and said, "Hey, I'm not going to lie. I'm really trying to drag myself out of a rut here. It seems like the same thing as last week. Physically, I feel fine. I want to go ride, but then I'm out there and I can't even come close to doing any type of workout. I get home feeling unsatisfied and it kind of continues this downward spiral. And now I'm in a weird spot because I want to hit reset to maybe this will like help me get 100% better. But at the same time, I'm close to this next big race. So I feel like I'd kind of be waving a white flag and maybe a break would be throwing all of my hard work out the window." So then on the other side, pushing through isn't really helping because I go outside and it's just oppressive. And so I said, "Man, I'm so glad you sent me this message because the funk that you're in is from all these things that you can't control. Extreme heat, you had a really weird bad luck crash, and a frustration at this race. So yeah, the past 3 weeks were just one of those times in cycling where it's like, can I get a break here? Everything is going wrong for you right now." And I'm glad you're telling me this because it's impossible for a coach to pick up on like a funk like this unless you say it. So this is a really good point to share with people, like, always verbalize how you're feeling. But at the same time, remember that, and sorry guys, this is a long story, but I think it's important. Watts and performance might just feel terrible in this weather. And this is why we go race, because guess what? Everyone is dealing with it. You probably won't set a PR, and you might look at like what Will's reading, the watts from his bike race. He's done races where he's done way more watts, way more VO2, way more threshold. Like that's just what the race was. So use this and move forward. And I know it's super gross and oppressive out, and you don't feel like you're progressing, but it's not always progression in endurance sports, or we'd all have 800 watt FTPs. Like so. And then the last piece of this is when he said, "I feel like I might be waving a white flag if I take a quick break." And I was like, man, a reset is never quote unquote throwing everything away. Sometimes the reset is what we need to do to come back stronger. He still had, at the time of the email, 16 days until his next big race. I'm like, let's take 3 days, chill, hit the reset. Slogging through is rarely the way. That's like the old school, like, I'm just going to tough it out and get through this. So don't feel bad if you're going through summertime, you're riding in 95-degree heat, and you feel like you're trash. That's what everybody's feeling like. So yeah, that's a long verbose statement, and I will put an asterisk that I did have an athlete who had this crazy PR in the heat, and we both said, "How the hell did you do that?" He was in a race, and he said, "I did not look at watts. I looked at my heart rate, and I went until I exploded. And man, the motivation when there's other people around you, I was not going to stop pedaling." And so, again, this is why we race. Like, weird stuff happens in races. But yeah, I don't know. Any comments or thoughts on that, Will, or anything you would add to that to just help motivate or encourage people that might be feeling crappy right now?
No, I totally agree. I've had like a few crashes lately. I almost broke my collarbone again last week, and it was hot, and I was just like having to ride in the heat all the time. I was like, man, this is like, you're just you got to train to RPE at that point. You're like, oh, the power is not great, and I'm jumping into one of the biggest crit series of the country after that training. But you just gotta just stay on it and make sure it stays fun, I think.
Dude, I love that. I always love that. Stays fun. I was talking to somebody on the phone about that today. So this will be the end of the Heat podcast. If you're only here for Heat, you should go. Will, Chicago Grit, give us a quick 2-second. What are you planning? Who are you there with the squad or what's going on?
Just one teammate with me. We've got maybe a little unspoken pact between a few guys to race hard together. Like if we're in the break, we're rolling. I've got a lot of friends in the field that'll do the same. But we're here at West Dundee Hill Challenge. So there's a hill, River Challenge. There's a hill, and it's going to be hard this first day, technical. So I love these courses, and I'm just going to race and have fun at these races. But I'm doing a YouTube series on it. They invited me to come out and do a YouTube series for them. So I've got like the 360 camera on today, and we'll see how that looks.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Will are any of these ACC crits, or is that over, or USA crits, or is anything going to be streamed live that people can watch?
I think Lake Ellen is the ACC crit. So that's one of the later days, and they should be streamed. I think last year it was streamed. It's a good race. It'll be fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Will. Any closing words for the peeps? That's it, everybody. Good luck with your training and racing. Hit us up if you have questions, and we will talk to you soon.